we don't know the history of the pink wall and who was the first person to post themselves in front of the pink wall on the Instagram, but apparently that's why it is the most popular place. And for me, that was such a great encapsulation of everything Nick was doing with this documentary.
Hey everybody, we are the Good Doctors of Abby Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And today we are talking about the 2021 HBO documentary Fake Famous, done by documentarian and social media expert and journalist and a whole lot of other things, Nick Bilton. It follows three folks, Dominique, Wiley, and Chris, who all answered a casting call, and the entire casting call was, do you want to be famous? So what Nick and his crew did was conduct a social experiment to see if they could take three relative unknowns on Instagram, different, whatever. We would have fallen into this category, by the way. And seeing through the manipulation of social media if they could make them famous. And the documentary follows that process. It is one of the most fascinating things I've watched in a minute.
Ever.
I have so many more follow-up questions, and what I really appreciated is that it bumps up into COVID, and so it can have the beginning of the conversation about how COVID has changed our understanding of the internet and about influencer culture. So that being said, there's the kind of 30-second plot summary. And Erin, your thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, I mean, it was so interesting because we were talking with our dear beloved friend, Brittany Breslin, who's a PR phenom in Northern Ireland, about this. Like, you had started watching it and we were speaking to her on the Zoom and talking about, like, whether influencer culture still exists. And the points Brittany brought up are exactly the points it made at the end about, like, the COVID of it all. And I think for you and I to come in to this discussion from a place where we've been talking about authenticity and generations and what Gen Z wants to see in social media and from companies and from all this kind of stuff was really so interesting. I was like, but these are the young kids who say they want things to be authentic and yet are part of perpetuating this influencer culture. And I mean, it starts with this like pink wall
at the Paul Smith store in Los Angeles, I was like, what is this? What is happening?
As Dr. Kristen said, it's a business in downtown Los Angeles, the Paul Smith store. It is now, or was before the COVID, the most popular tourist destination in Los Angeles. Not the Hollywood sign, not the Grauman's Chinese Theater, Rodeo Drive.
Not OJ's house in Brentwood.
Right. A pink wall. Because presumably we don't know the history of the pink wall and who was the first person to post themselves in front of the pink wall on the Instagram, but apparently that's why it is the most popular place. And for me, that was such a great encapsulation of everything Nick was doing with this documentary, was like, this is what influencer culture is. Like, why are these people flying? Like, while they were filming outside, they interviewed these young women from England who had traveled from England and spent $2,000 on flights so they could take pictures in front of the pink wall because they had seen people who are influential on Instagram post pictures in front of a pink wall. And I feel like, we can talk about the rest of what happens in this documentary. It was really interesting with the three case studies and how different their paths ended up being. But for me, like, you could just watch the first 10 minutes of this documentary and get a whole discussion out of it because, like, what are we doing? What are we doing with social media? How influential are these platforms? How much are we being manipulated by the content that we're seeing? Like, you might look at this documentary and think it's not going to raise a lot of serious questions, but I because of the content, but all it did for me was raise serious questions. But I think we can talk a little bit about each of the young folks that they selected.
Before we do that, I want to bring up one of the holes in that they did not talk about the science behind parasocial relationships.
Yes.
And I kept waiting for that because they kept asking questions where the answer is, well, everyone's in a parasocial relationship. So for people who don't know, anyone who's listening or watching us, a parasocial relationship is essentially what we all have with the people who live in our phones who we will never know. So if you are somebody who follows Chris Evans on Instagram and you know that his dog's name is Dodger and you have seen pictures of his tattoos and you feel vaguely protective of him, as millions of people do, you are in a parasocial relationship with Chris Evans. He does not know who you are. He probably will never know who you are. But the content that he posts makes you feel like you know him and you know him well. This is especially true for people like him who talk about mental health problems and people who appear, and for all we know, Chris is incredibly vulnerable, and that is really true, but obviously there are giant chunks of his life that we all don't get because we're not friends with him. Now, where this really started, the studies of this started to come out was with the Kardashians, because the Kardashians are the ones that trailblazed all of this. People that desperately believe that they know them, that we can get into conversations about which sister we would be more like as though they are characters. Because they are, and kind of all this other stuff. So parasocial relationships are a huge part of how A, the global economy works, and B, how humans now understand themselves. This was especially true at the beginning of the pandemic when celebrities were using their parasocial relationships for fundraising and things like that. You knew, and Dominique, who's one of the characters, gets into that a little bit at the end, that part of the parasocial relationship is that people will show up positively for you as well. Part of it is having a platform. But it's that emotional connection. There's lots of folks that have it with Harry Styles. We see this phenomenon with every boy band ever. Billions of people are in parasocial relationships with the members of BTS right now. It is the belief, even subconsciously, that you know this person based on what they present to the public. And there's lots of social science and psychological science behind it. And so I wish Nick would have interviewed or gone into it a little bit with somebody who could have explained to him why this mattered so much to people.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point to make, especially because they kind of outline the history of the idea of fame now.
Yeah.
And like how we have gotten to this point where you can be famous on a social media platform for being famous. And it was, they kind of trace it before the social media and technology changed, and reality TV really is what started to change it. Before that, you were famous for doing something.
Yes.
Only. You were an actor, a politician, an athlete.
A serial killer.
Like, you had done something.
You did something.
An action. And then we get, the explosion of, I would argue, like, the 24-hour news network then created reality TV because, it was really like the O.J. Simpson trial and the coverage of the white Bronco that kind of exploded this need for us to always be watching what's on the news and to have news 24 hours a day. And then people are really interested in like watching real life. And then we get the MTV reality shows of it all, The Real World and The Road Rules.
And then we get Survivor and the whole game changes.
Yeah, where ordinary people who haven't done anything.
Not a thing, just have cameras set up.
They are famous for being on television. And then we transition that to like the Kardashian of it all, where people are famous for being famous. The Kardashians, are humans. And now they do a lot of things, but they were not famous for doing anything specifically. Although ironically, Rob Kardashian is connected to the OJ trial, but not his children. And now you get then you get the social media of it all. And that's where we get this, both parasocial relationships and people being famous for posting pictures of themselves. Like, but
that's it. And then what this documentary really, really highlights is that most of those people aren't famous at all.
Right.
And that, somebody brings it up. It's like, well, if you're Instagram famous, you're not famous anywhere else. Like, there's millions of people with millions of followers on Instagram. And you may wonder why that is. And the answer is bots. The answer is you can buy as much engagement on these social media platforms as you want while you are busy faking every single picture you post. And I had known that it was fake. Like, I had known this. I'm a logical person in the 21st century. And I lived through Fyre Fest the way the rest of us did. Like, I get it. But the lengths to which the photos are staged was, like, it just crystallized some things for me. The one that I told Aaron about immediately was that, like, whenever I don't follow many influencers on Instagram, but there's a lot of times that I'll see someone sitting by a window on a plane, and I'm like, oh my God, they're going somewhere. That's so cool. I'm so jealous. I wish I was going to that place. If I was going to covet anyone's lifestyle, it would be the travel influencers. Absolutely. I would love to get a free vacation to Cabo, but alas, my bikini body is not good for their brand, and so therefore I will not be chosen for that endeavor. But there was essentially what Nick showed us is that you can buy a $12 toilet seat, hold it up to a projected picture of the Andes Mountains, and position the person in front of the toilet seat to make it look like that is an airplane window. And that is when I had to pause the movie and say nothing is real.
Nothing is real. Literally, like, in my notes, all caps, what is real? And nothing. And we're spending a lot of time in society and social discourse in the last year and a half talking about the influence of social media, right? We talked about Facebook a lot in the lead up to the 2020 election here in the United States and after, and the insurrection on January 6th. And so we're starting to unravel something that we hadn't unraveled before in terms of how these actually operate and the way that they promote certain posts and the way that they, use these algorithms to make money, because they're all companies making money. And, so I think this documentary, we were already primed for it in a way. And I'm not on Instagram, you guys know this, although I do some for Abby Research now. But I don't have a personal Instagram account. So a lot of this to me was still just like, what? This is what's on Instagram? I thought it was just my friends and cute puppy pics. And I didn't. I wasn't that naive. But for me, what was so fascinating was that this is known. And like, in terms of the three people that they chose, Dominique had been in Los Angeles, I think, the longest. And at one point she says, like, everyone I know uses fake bots. Everyone I know uses fake pictures. Like, she was the one that was the most comfortable with faking it in terms of the three of them. Because she was like, this is just what people do.
But she was the one who understood the assignment in a way.
She understood, yeah.
The two gentlemen did not.
And, part of the discussion is that all of these fake photos are used to get real things. Mm-hmm. To get trips, to get free merchandise, to get paid promotions. And, we can talk about the negative ramifications, and I think we should, of this level of exposure, because Wiley was such a great example of that. And Chris kind of bows out. Chris wants to be famous for being himself and doesn't want to be fake at all. Why did you agree to this experiment?
But there was literally... And we need to be honest with you guys, nothing about Chris that told me that he should be famous. Like, he kept saying, everybody needs the realness. I was like, of what? Like, you're not bringing anything to the table, pal. Like,
it was so interesting to me because the level of hubris that he oozed was like fascinating to me that he was just absolutely convinced that this young man from Tucson, Arizona should be the most famous person alive. But he also was so resistant to any sort of manipulation.
Yeah, like it was one of those things like, I mean, we don't buy bots and we never will. I will be very clear about that. Anyone who ever comes at us and says, Abby researched to buy bots, we will say, there you go. But on a level, like, that's how, we talk about putting in the work, part of being an influencer is the bots. Part of being famous, if you don't have a skill set, which he does not, is putting in the work. And even, like, he has this fashion line, and I think about how many hours I spend networking on Instagram and how many hours I spend doing these things for what we have as a competitive, legitimate product that we are trying to market, versus this young man who very much seemed to believe that, like, as long as somebody would put him on camera, he would become famous. And I was like, we don't have an understanding of work, do we? Okay.
Yeah, it was so interesting. He was absolutely fascinating, but eventually, like, it isn't relevant to the documentary anymore because he decides he doesn't want the interference from Nick. He doesn't want the fake bots and the fake followers and likes and all that kind of stuff, and so he kind of fades away. But you know, Dom is the one that is the most successful. She ends up getting paid promotions and lots of free stuff. And
we should be clear too that Dom's body, the way that Dom looks, is perfect. So she is tiny, she is young, she is beautiful. I don't believe she has pores on her face.
No, no, she's stunning.
She is exactly who these folks want to do. And Wiley, interestingly enough, is a very, like, he's like corn-fed farm boy gay in LA, which is a commodity because most people in LA don't have any body fat, and he had some. Or the gay influencers, which he talks about on Instagram. So Wiley was interesting. We're going to briefly talk about Wiley, and then we'll focus on Dom, because Dom's journey was my favorite. So
yeah, but I think Wiley's is so important because you talked about parasocial relationships as well, but also we have seen so much research recently, and this documentary shared a lot of it, just in screenshots of articles and research done on the negative ramifications of living life through the tiny little boxes in our hands.
Yeah.
And that social media anxiety is a real thing, that fear of missing out has a real psychological impact, especially on young folks whose brains are not fully developed and their sense of self is not fully grounded.
Yep.
And we've talked about this all the time. We are so grateful to be older millennials that did not grow up in our preteen and teen years with social media.
I cannot tell you how glad I am that not everybody had a phone in their pocket.
Oh my God, we would not have survived intact.
No, and I not, like, we don't want to be the pearl clutchers, but we are legitimately very concerned about Gen Alpha and Gen Z, because everybody is just using them, and no one is minding them. When we talk about the larger cultural stairs, and Wiley's a great example of that. So all of these guys are in their, like, early to mid 20s. They're kind of peak Generation Z. Wiley is a attractive gay young man from Atlanta, Georgia, who ended up in LA with some, I believe, misunderstandings of what a lifestyle in LA would look like, and that leads to a lot of this. He got a job working for a real estate agent who seems like a true jerk and doesn't like his life. And you can tell in the undercurrents that he thinks as soon as he kind of gets to 10,000 followers, he'll like his life. Having the conversation about not liking your life and using social media as the thing that will prove that your life is worthwhile is so much a theme of millennials down the generations that it's a trope. Like, it's discussed so often you don't want to discuss it anymore, but the reason we need to keep talking about it is that we haven't done anything to fix it. So Wiley does this whole thing, and he starts getting the bots, and he gets this stuff, and then somebody who knew him at some point in life, and it doesn't sound like they were particularly close, but it is somebody that he knew, comes at him in his DMs and is like, dude, this isn't you. Like, what is going on? Like, why are there all these shirtless pictures of you? Why are you in a robe at the Four Seasons? Like, it was kind of one of those, like, I got the vibe where it's like, so I know you work at Chipotle. Like, what is this nonsense? Which is not where he works, but, like, that's the kind of message I would send.
It was the vibe. Yeah.
It's like, you couldn't buy my beers last week, so, like, what is happening here? And he has a meltdown over it, which, to be honest, at his age, I would have too.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody can see right through me. Because this is the thing that is the really huge catch-22 about getting famous on social media by being fake, is that everyone's deepest fear is being thought of as fake. And so this catch-22 of like, well, of course you're being fake, Wiley. Of course you are. Like that, you have to be to get this that you want. And so he got to ask himself the question, what if I don't want this? And his answer was he didn't.
And it was so interesting that, like, immediately after this, he, like, he shut down his Instagram, and had a real crisis about it. But his immediate response, it took him a while to get to the point where he realized he didn't want it. Because his immediate response was to become hyper obsessed with becoming what he thought he needed to be, i.e. fake famous. And so he would post, like, they had video footage. It was just heartbreaking of the first time he posted after he had shut down his account. And he's obsessively, like, loading Instagram. Oh, the bots haven't kicked in yet. Why don't I have... I posted 30 minutes ago, and there's only, like, 35 likes. And, we've all been there. Even Dr. Kristen and I, who aren't, like, super, super... active on social media platforms, we've all been sucked into this need to be validated.
Oh my God. Whenever I post a new chapter of a fanfic, I'm hitting refresh on Archive of Our Own to see if I got a comment. It's something we talk about in fandom all the time, is where do you find your validation? Why are you creating? Who are you creating for? What is the cycle? It's one of the most common topics on all the Discords that I'm in, is how do you manage, we jokingly call it a praise kink, but like, how do you manage your need to be externally validated with a source of internal validation? Yeah.
And and that's why, it was heartbreaking to watch Wiley go through that, because we can all identify with it, and we've all been there, and we all still are there at times to varying degrees on this spectrum. And so I'm really glad that the documentary brought in that aspect of it and the real legitimate mental health crises that we are facing. Not just with the cyberbullying and the online bullying and the availability of that.
I think, and you bring that up. I think one of the problems is that we're focusing far too much on that. Not that that's not a big problem, but we're pretending that's the only problem.
Yeah.
And then data comes out, 3 months ago, that Facebook knows exactly how destructive it is to teenage girls and doesn't care because it's a capitalistic entity. The other thing is we expect these social media companies to care, and I don't know why we think that. They are businesses and we are in a free market economy. But then we get all indignant that Facebook isn't taking care of us. And I'm like, they never promised to.
They didn't. Yeah, and it's, because they are sold as a way to, it's a social network. It's about making friends, right? Like, the way that Zuckerberg sold Facebook first and then all the other platforms that developed was, he didn't sell them as, I'm going to do this to make money.
Yeah, no. And, to be clear, I'm not 100% sure that Mark Zuckerberg has the same kind of soul I have. I don't want to say that he's soulless, but I think we are different breeds of human in terms of caring about other people.
Yeah.
And I don't have a ton of respect for him, even less so after seeing Social Network. And I'm like, oh, you ruined all of our lives because you wanted a date? Got it. No problem, buddy. Thank you so much. So great. But
love it.
It's a really important conversation. And now this is a great transition into Dom, who thought she got everything she ever wanted. So Dom is, 5'2", 5'3", you could put her in her pocket.
Easily.
She's a great
person.
a great spokesperson for all of these lifestyle brands that want to attract people like her. All of her photos are faked, every single one of them. She was never at the Four Seasons when she was tagged in it. My favorite was this one person who was like, yeah, and if anybody would look close at the Four Seasons picture, they'd see that there was a fence post right behind the supposed redwood tree.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's obviously Nick's backyard. Like,
I think my favorite one of the fake photos for Dom was when she was at the Four Seasons spa, and it was like a rusty kiddie pool.
Yes,
filled
with fake rose petals.
With rose petals, and that you just they took the photo so close you couldn't see the edge of the rusty blue kiddie pool. And that was the moment where I was like, nothing is real. But yeah, I think, I'm really glad they filmed this right before the pandemic and then leading into the pandemic. So what happens to Dom is she gets what she thought she wanted. In terms of increasingly free stuff, more followers. She gets asked to go on this, what looked horrifying to me, and not fun at all, but we're different people, 24-hour paid trip to Las Vegas with a whole
that would have also, extrovert would have still been my nightmare.
Yeah, a whole other van full of influencers to take all these pictures. They got all this free stuff. What was really interesting, before we get to the end conclusion for Dom, what was really interesting that she got from this was how hard influencers have to work to get this. And so the appearance that they're just hanging out in fashionable clothes, drinking champagne, the number, like the grind to get what you want and how much planning goes into it. And, what was really interesting after the Las Vegas trip on their way home, she was like, at the airport, these girls have spreadsheets of who they talk to, when they talk to you, about what product. And we do that about the people that we meet so we can keep track of, people we might want to work with or we need to talk to again or who we need to email. Like, that's how business people operate. And that's how these business people operate, because they are running themselves as a business.
Yes, they are.
As professional salespeople. So I thought that was really interesting. But what we get to at the end with Dom is she finally gets the pinnacle, like a paid vacation to, I don't know, somewhere very fancy. All she has to do for a day in the spa, $1,000 shopping trip, 4 nights at this hotel is take pictures of her time there and post on Instagram. But she got this deal, what looks like, right at the start of March 2020. And they were preparing to go on this trip. Even the fake famous crew was going to go with her. And the whole world shut down because of the COVID. And it really, threw a wrench in her plans, but also forced her to take a step back and look at what was happening. And you get Nick's voiceover in this part as he's talking about, and showing all this footage of the whole world shutting down, everything going into lockdown. And then all the influencers still posting pictures. But he was like, they're posting pictures on a crowded beach when the beaches were closed. And that's when you see a real sharp turn in the ability of influencers to continue to influence people. Because everyone was at home. We were all at home in lockdown, this horribly scary virus spreading everywhere. And these people are like, I'm at the Four Seasons. And you're
like, no, you're not, because the Four Seasons is closed.
The Four Seasons is closed, and LA County is on lockdown, and we are all in a stay-at-home order. And also, people are dying horrible deaths by the day, and the numbers are growing. And why do I care that you're at the Four Seasons? And it forced Dom to rethink kind of the influence that influencers have. And she really starts to reject this idea. And at one point she just said, it feels inauthentic. And I was like, child, that's because it is. I love that you got there. That's because it is. And so she starts to rethink, she still has influence on this platform, and she thinks about the way she wants to utilize that during that time. And it was a cool way to kind of wrap it up. I don't know where we're going. They end kind of not on a happy note, with people in masks in front of the pink wall taking pictures. And lots of baby kids being Instagram influencers. But it was a fascinating way to wrap it up. And I think one of the best lines, we had a lot of talking heads, people who study influencers and write about them, and social scientists and all this kind of stuff. And the one of the final conclusions that one of them said was, the entire concept of influencing is to make you feel worse.
That really stuck with me. Like, of course it is. I mean, that's the point of marketing. Like, the entire beauty industry is to make you feel less than, so that you buy this cream. Like, I got that, abstractly. But to really think about it, like, oh man, yeah, that's true.
And hopefully we're getting to a place, as we, 2 years in, are still in a global pandemic, that has forced us to rethink everything and has changed everything, that hopefully this will start to change this too, where, you know what, the world is in a pretty bad place right now. Why would I want to engage in something that's going to make me feel worse?
Yeah.
And so hopefully, we start to see this critique continue. We saw a lot of it with the Black Lives Matter protests following the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, as well as the COVID, where you really started to see people push back against brands and celebrities who were, showing up to these protests to take Instagram photos, and the inauthenticity of it all and the disingenuousness of it all. So will this continue as we hopefully move to a different place in the pandemic, where society engages more in person? I don't know. I would like to have hope for that.
I think it is possible to go a couple different ways here.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're going to be researching for a while is how many more people were on social media during lockdown. Obviously, you saw the rise of a lot of social audio apps, in particular Clubhouse, Green Room, Wisdom, and the ramifications of online shopping. I mean, brands did really well, even if influencers didn't.
Yeah.
And so all of that is going to get wrapped up in Instagram. And neither one of us are fans of analyzing things midstream.
Right.
And so, we're just kind of positing, as we sit here talking in October of 21, what it's going to look like. But like you very well pointed out, we're 18, 20 months in to what could very easily be 3 to 5 years. And so what do we really know is very, very little. But the patterns we're seeing so far across the board are that people are craving comfort, safety, and authenticity. Mm-hmm. And that's not only in their personal, physical spaces, obviously the rise of athleisure and the revolution against underwires, but also in their phone spaces, in the social media spaces. There is much more public conversation now about unfollowing people than I've ever heard before, for reasons other than politics. Like, we're just saying, like, hey, if that steals your joy, get rid of it. And that is a new development in these times. So I think overall, this is on HBO Max, by the way, which we said at the beginning, but let's remind you again. It's on HBO Max. It hopefully you can locate it in some way, shape, or form wherever you are in the world, because it is worth a thought, worth a lot of thoughts. And we hope we've convinced you of that as we have been waffling here.
Clearly we had a lot of thoughts about it. We were like, oh Lord.
So as incongruous as this is, one of the other realities is that none of us are ever going to escape social media. And so if you would like to follow people who don't get paid to sell anything, and in fact just talk about their lives, we're some good folks for that. So follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and you will get all the updates of what's going on. We would love it if you would like and subscribe, whatever platform you're enjoying this on, whether it be YouTube or a podcast, and tell your friends. If this episode made you think, we would love to be forwarded to their ear holes as well. and be able to continue the conversation with you and your friends, either in the comment section or somewhere in our email or our instant messages.
That's right. So, ironically, ending our rant about the toxicity of social media with a plug for our own social media. But hey, this is 2021.
Welcome to 2021.
And we're living in it, and we're trying to make a living just like everybody else. We hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.